end up talking about the Foot Home project in Memphis. Brad.
Hey. Thanks. Awesome. Well, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. Like Martin said, I'm a photojournalist in Memphis. I've been here since about 2013. I went to undergrad in the University of Illinois in Champaign-Urbana for natural resources and environmental sciences, and then got interested in photography while I was there, and started doing a bunch of taking as many art classes as I could, and I started working at a student newspaper. So after undergrad, I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to go into, so I decided to take, I was fortunate enough to get a couple internships. So I went out to Kansas for one of them and then Seattle for another. And during that year, I sort of, continued my passion with photography and decided that's something that I want to pursue. So this was from a salt mine in Kansas where I spent some time with workers down there. And after that year of grad school, after the year of internships, I, like I said, decided I really wanted to pursue photography full time. So I decided to go into grad school at Ohio University, which was and is one of the top schools for photojournalism in the country, and started kind of pursuing longer-term documentary work. So while I was in Ohio, I photographed kind of revolving around the prescription drug epidemic that was going on, and still kind of ravaging that area. So I spent years documenting a father, Travis. I met him as soon as he got out of jail, and he for drug-related issues. And he had broken up with his wife while he was in jail. Met him when he was just getting out, so he was a single father, and trying to stay clean and be with his kids and sort of figure it all out while under house arrest. And then spent kind of years documenting him and his struggles as far as like staying away from old friends, kind of being drawn back into old habits. And so while in grad school and while working on projects like this was kind of like the point for me where I really fell in love with the act of photography as kind of a longer term exercise, as far as spending so much time like being there for holidays, and as a photographer, like when you make these sort of relationships, it's almost like you're supposed to be there as a photographer, so it lets you be there for more intimate moments and kind of build trust over the years. So that was some of that work. And also, this is, I'm presenting or whatever, but like it can be a total conversation. So as we go along, if you have questions or anything like that, don't hesitate to ask. And I'm going to kind of cruise a little bit through this early work because I wanted to talk about more work in Memphis. So after grad school, I did more internships kind of across the country. This was in New Hampshire, and these are internships for newspapers, so this is for the Concord Monitor. And like I said, being passionate about kind of longer-term stories, it's difficult sometimes working in newspapers because you kind of drop in when something's going on, and then all of a sudden you're moving on to the next assignment. And I had one assignment in Concord from a family. This is Josh. They had the extended family of a young man named Bob Richard who had gone missing, and the family had nowhere to turn. They were working with the police, but felt like that wasn't enough. So it was a quick assignment to sort of photograph the family, and then the reporter wrote a story about them kind of searching. And I asked them if it would be okay to kind of come along with them as they, continue to search out on their own, and sort of what it's like searching for a loved one and not knowing what happened. Pretty early on, they kind of presumed that he had passed away, but they weren't quite sure where he was or what had happened. He had some mental health issues and was at sort of a care facility, and then he left there and stayed at a homeless encampment for a little while, and then that's where he disappeared. So the family sort of spent time talking with people at the encampment and trying to just figure out any clue. And so what was and what would have been kind of a quick just portrait of a family ends up being more of a kind of intimate look at what it's like to go through what they're going through, which is kind of what I strive to do with photojournalism, is help people connect to people that are going through all sorts of things. Sometimes it's really tough, sometimes it's really, happy moments. So Bob he did end up he was found in the river months later. And just with the relationship that I have with the family, I was out on an assignment a couple hours away, and they called me as soon as they found Bob, just because they felt like I should be there because I'd been there for so much. They were like, you need to come here. And then was able to, photograph the more intimate moments after something like that. So that's the family, Josh and his wife Sherry, and their daughter, and a family friend in their house kind of afterwards. So they all gathered with the police until Bob's body was taken away, and then just kind of gathered as a family to sort of support each other. And this is the funeral where they later reached the spot where he was found. And so, grad school, a bunch of internships. This was a photo that I took in New York when I was interning for the New York Times. It was the only photo I had that was a front page picture, like the main picture on the front page of the New York Times. So I spent a summer in New York. And then I had an internship with National Geographic where they sent me to Kyrgyzstan to work with archaeologists that were searching for a palace or possibly a prison that had been destroyed by an earthquake way back in the day that used to be on the Silk Road. And so I did all of these different internships and stuff, and that's what landed me in Memphis back in 2013. There was a wonderful photo editor that used to work here, John Sale, and I had a classmate that had worked for him and a few other people that had experiences with him, and a job opened up in Memphis, and I really wanted to come down here and was fortunate enough that I got the job back in 2013. So I was able to work with John for 4 or 5 years before the newspaper sort of changed. So I came down here and kind of photographed everything. This is John Ruskey. This was on a canoe trip down the Mississippi River. He's a canoe outfitter based out of Clarksdale. This was the tornado that went through Tupelo in 2014, I think. So I had just arrived and met her on the road. She was walking up and I walked with her, and she was really worried. She was at bingo that night and was just really worried about if she had left her animals at home, because you never expect your home to be destroyed when you leave. And so I made this one picture. There's a couple other ones around there, but it was mostly helping kind of search for her dog after the fact, because I arrived at the same time as she did. This is a family, I don't know if you all remember, but the towboat that sank on the Mississippi a few years ago, and a father and son were the pilots of the towboat, were lost. And at this point in time, no bodies had been found or anything like that, and the family was hopeful, as anyone would be, that maybe they escaped and were able to swim to shore somewhere and were injured and not able to contact anyone. So similar to working in New Hampshire, I kind of spent time with the family as they went out on their own searching for any clues of where people would go or where their loved ones had gone. And then obviously in Memphis and around the country, covering some of the civil unrest and protests around policies and police shootings and Confederate statues. So this was during the march to the bridge when I-40 was shut down. This was outside of a protest at the Fortis statue at Health Sciences Park that finally came down recently. So there it is, getting towed off. And then that's from the evening when the bridge protest took place. And so like I said about long-term work, that's kind of where my passion lies. So while in Memphis, I've tried to photograph families and stories over the longer term as much as I can. So this was one that I worked on about a veteran, Paul Joseph Oliver, who had passed away. He dealt with a lot of PTSD issues coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. And so it was sort of photographing the family as they sort of dealt with the loss of a loved one and what Paul meant to the community. So that's his dad, Ron, in the last picture. And his mom, Nancy, I believe. His sister, Mary. He was in Veterans Court at the time, which is like a specialized court for veterans who are dealing with PTSD to go through. So that's Judge Bill Anderson and sort of the court assistant. I'm forgetting exactly, but Paul was he was the first veteran that they lost who was going through the program at Veterans Court, and it really hit them hard. They're both wonderful to have a court set up like that can deal with people that they know exactly what they're going through. And so part of it was Ron kind of helped his son with a house when he got back, and he passed away in this house, and he, kind of stayed busy, helped afterwards, and sort of, heal in a way. He was getting the house ready to sell again, which is really difficult. He could only spend a certain amount of time in the house. His son had passed away there. That's the room where he had passed, and that was the one that was kind of the furthest behind that work because he just had such a difficult time being in there. And so when you see some pictures, like it may seem like kind of simple pictures or whatever, but to be able to like be there for even just moments like this, just spending time in a house, it required, for me, to feel comfortable photographing people, it requires a lot of time as far as being able to be there, and then subsequently being invited to more intimate moments. Another story that I worked on for a while was sort of the impact of gun violence on communities in Memphis. And so part of it, obviously, is the immediate impact and sort of the trauma that happens with gun violence and police and communities. But I didn't want it to be about that. I wanted it to be about families and families and community, and how they deal with the fallout of losing loved ones. This is Reginald and his wife, and that's their son that they lost, little Sam. And this is at a candlelight before, on the anniversary of his death, which is around Halloween. So there were some trick-or-treaters going by there with candlelight. Batavius was hit by a stray bullet, being cared for by his grandmother. Stanley Stanback was robbed and recovering at his mother's house, and that was his girlfriend or wife at that point. And then this is Whitney Wallace. She's lost loved ones to gun violence and set up a kind of a nonprofit called Crowning Our Youth, which basically she tried to put on as many events and things just to keep the youth involved with each other, and an outlet for support and community after tragedy. And so she set up this candlelight vigil where it wasn't for someone in particular, it was for whoever was lost. It wasn't necessarily for gun violence or anything like that, but that was the majority of people who showed up were honoring loved ones who lost to gun violence. This is Valerie, who lost her son, Calvin Wilhite. He was shot and killed right outside the FedEx Forum. And so this was a candlelight vigil, not the year that he was lost, it was either the first or second anniversary of his death. And it's a Mount South murder, so the family, is still dealing with not having kind of any more closure to what happened to their son. And so I met them directly afterwards. And obviously you don't get to know people right away, but spent the whole time at their first candlelight and talked to them afterwards, was invited to his funeral, and then subsequently have gone back every year and try to keep in as best touch as I can as far as, you know, photographing and be able to get back photos and prints. I don't know my notes, but she's at her father's grave, who was killed by gun violence also. And then so this is all, like I said, I came here in 2013 to work for the Commercial Appeal. Was going through its issues, and then so I've documented that also. You know, I think photographing my own life and sort of things that are happening around it are important also. So it's kind of looking at the place where I worked as it sort of changed immensely over the years as far as the number of people that worked there, different companies that owned it, and sort of the big move that happened when they moved out to 495 to the offices that they're at now.
Brad, I keep thinking about the tension that there must be between being behind the camera and wanting to but also emotionally invested, obviously, in some of these things. And kind of how do you balance that with wanting to, what you're documenting and the artistic side of it, and all of these are such gut-wrenching situations.
Yeah. It is a balance. I mean, like, there's definitely, you know, people, I am behind the camera for every single picture that's taken, right? So, like, every single view that you guys are seeing is me with my eye behind the lens. There's so much time between those pictures, you know, like little 1/500th of a second, and spending time talking afterwards to the people that are impacted, and then people that I can like talk to about having experienced those things secondhand, you know. But it is tough because, like, as a photojournalist and the way that I work, I'm there for years usually on the projects that I'm showing you. There's a few that are a little bit shorter, but being like talking with people about like why I'm there and what I'm hoping to show. And at the end of the day, why I'm there is because I feel like the people I'm photographing are very important, and what I'm hoping to show is exactly what they would like to say about their experiences. So I don't know if I'm getting at what you want or what you're kind of asking, but it's heavy. I mean, you know, like, I'm fortunate enough to have photographed in these situations, and I can leave and I can go back to my home in a different part of town or in a different state or anywhere, and not be directly impacted by what I photograph all the time. And people who live there can't, and it's a tough thing to balance, I suppose.
Do you get turned away much?
Sure. Yeah. A lot of the, and I just sort of very short at it from gun violence stuff, but you know, a lot of that is showing up right after something horrible happens. And if people don't want me there or don't want pictures, I'm completely fine with that. You know, like, that's their decision. And it does get heavy sometimes. And but if someone says no or clearly doesn't want to be photographed, I'm fine with that. So it's kind of a part of it. And if you, it's a tough balance, but if you're not like okay with rejection, I don't think you can be a photographer, because you're rejected all the time as far as like making sure people are comfortable with you being there photographing, and making sure you're comfortable photographing what you're photographing. And I think that's why it helps, for me at least, to stick around for a long time and get to know people, because you know, things open up and you get more comfortable with each other. And like I said, you're there as a photographer, but you're also there as something much more than that. You're there as a person first, and you can't spend years with people and not get to know them as like basically as, you know, friends or acquaintances in a pretty intimate way.
Do you have to have written permission if it's going to be a published picture?
Not for journalism, no. I mean, like, in the United States, you know, if you're in public, you're free to be photographed or video recorded. Some places are trying to change that, especially when photographing police. I think it was Arizona recently that is trying to pass a don't record police law, which is a very unfortunate thing. And then there's an understanding, but like you don't necessarily need written permission. If you're doing advertisements or anything like that, you do. But for journalism or for art, it's not necessary.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that you should try to publish people's pictures that aren't likely to be. Yeah.
Why on television do we increasingly see blurred faces then?
I think that it's going through a moment of what people thinking about privacy. I don't know the certain situations you're talking about or situations, but I don't think it's necessarily for like legal reasons, but it might just be for their own sort of in-house rules that they follow. So, did you get a situation where they?
Well, many.
Yeah.
Almost any news program, whatever, it's from the crowd or like the bore out the ones who are not
if it's
subject to that particular.
Sure, I think if that's I think that's fine. I don't know if they would have asked or if they're interviewing folks. Sometimes people ask for their identity not to be known for safety reasons and other things, and you have to weigh that as a but I don't know if that would be like because of any law as far as that goes. It might just be because of the conversation they had with them and the people that they're photographing or videoing.
It's children. No, it is children.
Yeah.
To a good extent. It's also what others have noticed as well.
Yeah.
But kind of related to Virginia's question, you ever been in a situation where you felt torn about wanting to intervene to prevent harm?
Yeah. Not to the direct effect of, I mean, like, it's a big question because what is harm? You know, like, there's sort of, like, directly as far as, like, saving someone's physical safety? No, I haven't felt like that before. There were some moments in West Virginia when I was working on with Travis and his family, as far as, like, there probably isn't, like, the safest place for children right now, as far as, you know, using drugs in front of them, and stuff like that. And that didn't come up much, but no, I haven't personally felt like the need to step all the way in, either help in that direct moment or reach out to anything else. I know people have had in certain situations, but yeah. So this is started the stuff from Foot Homes, which was the last major public housing project in Memphis. There were 6 of them initially. And so, notes here. So in 2011, before I got here, a couple years before I got to Memphis, the city started applying for federal grants to tear down and relocate the residents of Foot Homes. And they didn't get it year after year. And then when I first arrived, you know, looking for, like I saw Foot, it was, you know, a few blocks away from the newspaper, and looked into whether or not anyone had really worked and told any stories there, or if the families had been documented outside of, you know, quick journalism things. And I didn't really find much. It's on Danny Thomas, or it was on Danny Thomas, between Vance and Mississippi, sort of just a couple blocks southeast of the FedEx Forum. And so when I started reading about the grants that the city hadn't been able to get, and people still living there, I wanted to go in and talk to residents about how it felt to live there, what their perceptions of it were, and then also just looking at like the uncertainty of living in a place that you you know is trying to be torn down, and you have to move, and it's not really your decision. So looking at what it's like living with that uncertainty. And at the time there was kind of Foot was the first of the public housing projects, and it was the last one, that there was actually some pushback by quite a few residents about whether or not they wanted to leave at all, and about redeveloping it, in a way of like fixing it up and being able to stay there, or having it just be torn down and be able to be moved out. So this is not the best photo, you'll see him later on, but this is Ivory Lobbins. He was one of the first people that I met there, and ended up photographing him the whole time. I'm still in touch with him. And he really helped introduce me to Foot Homes and people he knew there, and then sort of spiderwebbed out from there as far as, you know, I think at the time when I first started photographing there was about 1,200 people that lived in Foot. Didn't get to know them all, obviously, but was able to photograph and spend time with quite a few different people and get their sort of opinions and experience of living there and what they thought about the possibility of it being torn down and having to move. This is Lucy on the far left, babysitting for her sister's kids, and then her daughters in this picture also. She was another person that I photographed a bunch and spent a lot of time with. I actually just photographed her sister's wedding a couple months ago. And so Lucy and her brother they lived together in Foot with Lulu's daughter. And their mom had passed away when they had all lived there together. And Lucy was the older sibling, sort of took over and were able to stay there. And she was one of the residents that really wanted to leave. Before I got there, her apartment had a bullet come through the window, and raising her daughter, she just felt like it wasn't safe. This is Derek on the right with Jessica in the evening. Lisa Conrad in the back, and Mandy Richardson. Lisa wanted to stay. She, for what published in the Commercial Appeal, I wrote the story and had photos, and fortunately they were able to give quite a bit of space. I think it was, 7 or 8 pages long. And I didn't want it to be like normal journalism work as far as just writing a story about people or about something. I wanted it to be mostly from the voices of the people that I was photographing, so it was very quote heavy, and sort of sectioned off as far as, like I had a little section on Lisa, on Ivory, a couple other people that you'll meet here shortly, and it was just kind of about their experience in their own words, and photographs of what daily life is like for them, and sort of getting at the benefits and the hardships of living in Foot at that time. So the nice thing about Foot Homes was that it was right near downtown. I mean, like, it was right near FedEx Forum, it was right near Beale Street, it was right near South Main. So there were a lot of jobs and opportunities that were nearby, that were walkable, because as we all know, like, public transportation in Memphis isn't great at all. So if you don't have a car, it's very difficult to get around for work opportunities. And also just to be able to have an evening like everyone wants to have. So this was Lisa and Mandy before they wanted to go out to dinner. And we were able to just walk to South Main. This was Lucy's boyfriend at the time, the day that the grant was acquired by Memphis to tear down. So I went right over there as they announced it and kind of met up with people that I had known for a while and asked them about what, how it felt now that the grant came through. It's sort of like it's a little bit literal of a picture, but kind of the waiting game and sort of always being up in the air about what was going to happen. And it was finally decided. This was at maybe the first 4th of July that I was there, I think. So this is Ivory. always wanted to be an artist and a tattoo artist. He has sickle cell and had a hard time holding heavier objects. So he just, being a tattoo artist, he couldn't do it just because of holding a big vibrating heavier object. But loved art and was always drawn. Got a couple of his drawings. So this is maybe on the way to dinner from that other picture that we saw earlier. So, you know, very walkable to be able to walk to South Main. I think we went to dinner at Ernestine and Hazel's that night and had a couple of burgers. This was another day I was hanging out with Lisa. We just walked over to the corner store, and then police stopped us and asked us what we were doing. Mainly because I was a white guy in foot homes, and you know, residents talked a lot about that too. I mean, the over-policing of the area as far as being stopped and hassled walking to and from wherever you're going. I mean, my first experience with Lisa actually being stopped for absolutely nothing. We were just walking back. This is Lucy, Lulu, going to, every year there'd be like an anti-violence sort of block party at one of the basketball courts where, you know, the mayor would show up for a little bit, police would be there, and basketball games and stuff for kids. 4th of July. This was the last 4th of July before everybody moved out.
What year was that?
Gosh, I want to say 2016 or 17. The years get mixed up. I've been there since 2014, maybe late 2013. And so, a lot of what many people talked about were just how, you know, they found family in foot homes. Everybody's sort of living near each other, being able to rely on each other for all sorts of different things. And this is Kevin giving a haircut. So he was known as, like, on the west side of foot homes, he was one of the great barbers, and a lot of different neighbors came over to him for haircuts. This was at another one of the anti-violence sort of block party days. And like I said, I didn't find much media per se, or many different takes on what it was like living in foot homes or any of the public housing projects that were in Memphis. And while I was there for those years, I mean, really, like I said, the cameras only showed up either at this event or when they were having sort of community meetings about what to do as people were getting ready to move out, or if something tragic happened, you know, like someone gets shot or something like that, then, you know, media and police would converge for a couple hours and then leave, and then that's kind of what everyone would be left with about a place if you watch the news is, oh my gosh, foot homes, there must be only shootings going on there, because that's the only kind of thing that's portrayed.
Were you ever afraid to walk in there?
I'm not gonna lie and say I wasn't nervous when I was first going and meeting people, but after the first couple of days, getting to know a few people, no, not at all. There was a couple times.
The people you know, it's the people who.
No, but I mean, like once I knew a few people there, you know, walking around, and also like I stand out, and there's not many people. 1,200 people is a lot, but when you live in a community like that, you kind of get to know faces more than names right off the bat. So recognize a lot
of people have fallen victim. I mean, kids out playing.
For sure.
You know, it can happen to you too.
It can happen to anybody, anywhere.
Absolutely.
You know, like
Collierville in a country school.
Yeah. And that's scary. I mean, that's the world we live in right now. Is guns are readily available all over the place, and there's not much help for folks that
Or the
need it.
brave.
Yeah. This is Martavius and Mady making a picture before his funeral. He didn't actually live in foot homes, but the funeral was across the street. He was around quite a bit, so people knew him well. And like I said about knowing people and kind of supporting each other, this was a sort of donation bucket for Martavius that was in one of the corner stores. Just because, you know, even though you didn't necessarily know their name right off the bat or anything, people were so well known that, you know, you can help however you can for people going through something like that. And I didn't realize initially when I was photographing there, the fence didn't actually exist. It was kind of an open. There were other homes in there. It was more crowded as far as the number of people living there, but it wasn't all fenced in. Which I wonder about, you know. It's kind of sort of prison-esque. It's not like there was any security at the gates or anything like that, as far as there were just the giant fence around it. This is AJ and his son. I don't know if there's any other photos of AJ in this edit, but he lived in Foot for a long time, and then when he moved out, he moved with his parents. He's on the near north side of Memphis. The last time I talked to him, kind of just north of the Pinch District, like St. Jude campus and stuff. This is LaShonda. This is the only photograph of her in here, but she was one of the voices that really wanted to stay. So she lost both her parents when she was pretty young, and then lived in public housing since she was very young, I think 5. I don't have my notes, but she, like many other people, found family where she lived. She called it her little L, and so she was great friends with her neighbors next door and kind of everybody. And since she was an only child and she had lost her parents, she was really worried as it changed and as she'd have to move out, that she would lose kind of her chosen family after losing her blood family relatives.
So can I ask you, so the flag is in the military?
It is. Her father was in the armed forces, and then that's from his funeral. Yeah. And so I made that picture, like tons of pictures around that, obviously, sort of trying to relate to her family connection and loss from when she was younger, and then kind of how she's connected to the community now. Snow in Memphis. This is outside of Lulu's place. One of her, it's either her daughter or one of her sister's kids. They were all playing outside, so I went by and visited during the big snow that happened, I don't know, 2014 or 15. It snowed more often than I thought it would since I've been down here. Getting ready for a birthday party. So, you know, like I said, being able to, and being fortunate enough and to be able to spend so much time with people, you know, you're invited to birthday parties and major life events, whether they're good or bad. So, for this one, it's always a great one. Like, who doesn't love kids' birthday parties? This was then walk into the corner store to get some extra food and drinks for the party.
So, like, all of us have experienced probably power outages at some point in Memphis.
Yeah.
Either like when it's really hot or really cold.
Yeah.
And I know that there are some communities that have like experienced it for like extended periods of time.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know, like, were you ever there when Foot Homes experienced anything like that?
I was not there for any power outages, and honestly, this is just me hypothetically like thinking about the situations. I think that their power was probably pretty well connected, because it wasn't, I think it was probably underground lines, because there weren't like lines going to each apartment or anything. And it's probably on a similar grid to like downtown stuff. But downtown, even though downtown has lost power a few more times than you'd expect the last couple of years, it's more like the neighborhoods with the giant trees and stuff like that. So I don't think that was, I can't speak to it because I wasn't there 24 hours a day, but I wasn't there to experience any of that.
Well, the more affluent neighborhoods in East Memphis, they usually go without power a lot longer because their lines are above ground, and they take the attitude of the city that those people can go to a motel or hotel.
Like Soulsville.
Yeah, I know parts of South Memphis, then, you know, they'll lose power for a long long time.
I promise you, they don't care about anything back up.
This is another young woman who lost her life. She was Mynesha Johnson. She was shot and killed in downtown Memphis, kind of across from, whatever the big bar is that has all the plate flying saucer, I think. So she was shot right outside of there, and she lived right across the street from Foot. And I met her family pretty quickly afterwards, and then was invited to a few of the candle nights that took place afterwards and the funeral. So the whole community, or a lot of the community, got together for a candlelight and sort of a celebration of her life in Foot Homes, which was the second one. The other one was right outside, kind of where she had lived. This is the funeral at one of the churches across the street. And then the funeral procession afterwards, even if it was a smaller church, it was packed completely full, so if you couldn't make it, there were people lining the street to sort of give their prayers and thoughts as the procession passed. It was at a corner store. Lulu and her daughter. This is another one of the kind of public gathering days where they brought in some horses for horseback rides, and I thought that was really neat. It's the only time I saw a horse around there, and it was really, really cool to see.
Who's playing those events?
I knew at some point in time, but I think it's, I couldn't say. It's city or police department or, yeah. But then
Streets across the streets.
Streets was involved quite a bit, yeah. The family after there was a fire in their apartment, in their unit. JD really wanted me to take a picture of him dunking. It's like that was one of the times, one of the many times I would be walking through to either go to or from someone's place that I was visiting and run into someone that I know. And yeah, so got that picture. Also part of the thing, like spending so much time, you want to be able to give back in a way as a photographer. So one of the things that I enjoy doing is trying to print off as much as I can. Just taking a wide edit of photos. And these are photos for me and for projects and for work at a newspaper or whatever. There's so many other photos in between, family portraits, things like that I'll print off and try to get back to people. And then oftentimes it kind of makes it difficult sometimes, like Lulu loved to hang them up all over the place. So in my pictures, eventually it would become like my pictures with a bunch of my pictures at the top. This was the big celebration press conference when the city got the $29 million grant to begin the South City redevelopment. Derek again getting a haircut. So Derek was another person. He was surprisingly young when I met him. Like he always seemed like he was older. I guess I was pretty young too. This was already almost a decade ago. But he lost his mom and was living with his stepdad, and so being through hardship like that, losing your mom when you're young, and trying to figure it out, I think that moving was tough for him too, as far as figuring out where he would go, being worried about kind of being on his own, leaving a place that he had always known. Impromptu Monopoly game. Some of the meetings talking about what to do with it, and people, showing up kind of protesting or being against wanting to be moved out. You know, improve, don't remove. Foot Homes Memphis was what quite a few residents wanted. Because I think part of it also, and like I said, there are 1,200 people that live there. I don't know them all, but as people moved out, only a few of them that I know stayed nearby. I mean, a lot of people moved pretty far down into South Memphis and pretty far out into Frazier. And then the amount of time that it takes to rebuild, which has been, you know, there's families moved in there now. But you know, that's 2 or 3 or 4 years between you move farther away, start your life over, and then don't have the resources or don't have the time to really consider wanting to move back closer to downtown or back into a neighborhood. And all, you know, it changes the way the city's laid out, really, as far as where people live and where people used to live.
Do they have a love-hate relationship with policemen? I mean, I would think that some of them recognize they need protection, but they're also afraid of the police. I would think. Yeah,
definitely. I mean, I think it depends on the situation or like that. I can't speak to what individuals think about police per se.
I mean, I would think there are police that they regard as friendly toward them also. I mean,
individual officers probably.
Right.
You know,
what I'm talking about.
Yeah. But what came up often was kind of the over-policing, you know, like walking back from the job, just a couple blocks away and getting like stopped and
like why did they
questioned.
stop that woman? Yeah.
Exactly. You know, and this is Proctor and Ivory. So this is Ivory's stepdad. He just had a surgery to remove his leg from the knee down. This is one of the housing fairs where they tried to help people kind of see what their options were for where they could move to. Ivory's last night in Foot Homes. And then so, I really like this picture, kind of gets at the proximity of everything. So those are the main fireworks for like the downtown fireworks celebration. And then young boy kind of firing off his own firework on foot. This is Rita. She was a person that really didn't want to leave. She lost her son to cancer while she lived there. So a lot of her memories, the most recent memories of her son, were in Foot, and she felt it would be really hard to move away. So it's a handprint of her son. As she was packing up, she really wanted to show me that.
So I have a question. Did the city, once they closed Foot Homes, did the city ensure that everyone living there was moved into other city housing, or?
No, I mean, so this was the, like, MHA still is around, like Memphis Housing Authority, but there's not much of it anymore. So it's all kind of moving towards like Section 8 housing, where it's like supported private housing, which has a lot of its own issues. But yeah, they try to help everybody find a place to move to, but not necessarily with MHA anymore, I wouldn't think. Lulu at her new place. And like I said, Lulu was one of the families that was really looking forward to moving out. And kind of she loved their spot that she moved into. It was, had her own yard and a bigger spot in Frazier. Ivory's kind of hopped around since then. He's lived in Little Rock outside of Atlanta, moved back to Memphis, and has moved in multiple different places in Memphis. This is the celebration day of the beginning to tear it down. Oops.
Were people still living there?
When it was being torn down?
Yeah.
No, they didn't start to tear it down until everybody had moved out.
Yeah.
So they moved everybody out and then kind of sealed up the fencing. And then tore it down.
Do you know, like, what the time frame was from when they were told they needed to leave and when everyone was out? Or when they had to
Good
get out?
question. I could look back at my pictures, but it would be kind of a guess right now. There was quite a bit of time though. And judging by like, because someone would move out the door, get a board on it, and it was pretty like sporadic as far as like, or not sporadic, but it was pretty spaced out over time as far as you'd see a couple boards and then you'd see a second. So I think it was quite a bit of time between when the first person when they were told that they need to move to the time that the last person had moved out. So I photographed quite a bit as it was being torn down, and ran across this young man who had lived there, so we talked for a little bit, and then made a portrait of him, and then kind of photographed him as he was there. And he actually was one of the people that moved nearby. So Claiborne Homes across the street was also public housing, and that was torn down and redeveloped years before Foot Homes was. And then this was another person that I photographed a few times. Like we didn't I didn't spend a bunch of time with her, but a couple of years after she moved out, her daughter was going to prom, so she called me up and asked me to come photograph the day when getting ready for prom, going out, leaving the house and everything, kind of the party that was around it. This might have been from the graduation party actually, though, which I was also with. And then so, like you asked about with the housing in the back, this is Miss Ford. I got to know her through Ivory, and so her and Ivory moved out at the same time, and it had been a few days, and I wanted to check it on her, and I called Ivory to go and spend the day with her, and she moved into a place in the middle of summertime in Memphis, and there was no air conditioning. No air conditioning there. This is all in these, contracts in Section 8. She had been calling the same number, these different numbers, trying to get in touch with somebody to come out and put the air conditioner in. And she was promised. They said that it had been stolen. I'm not going to say they were lying, but it didn't look like anything had been hooked up for a while. But she had an impossible time getting in touch with them. I went out there, saw the situation, called the reporter at the Commercial Appeal, and was like, we should probably do a story on Miss Ford and sort of the follow-up of like what it's like for people as they're moving out of Foot into the Section 8 housing. One call and a voicemail to the same exact number that Miss Ford had been calling over and over again, and the problem was fixed. It's not that she had the wrong number and she wasn't reaching out to the right people. It was just that, they weren't moving very fast for an older lady that has health issues in the summertime in Memphis with no air conditioning. Which I thought said a lot about sort of the sort of care that goes into some of the housing where people are getting placed at.
Also the power of recording.
Yeah, well that too, but you don't want to have to and the lack of power that someone has moving into a Section 8 place, as far as calling the same number and not having anything happen. So I made a lot of detailed pictures also in Foot and around sort of the marks that we leave and like the homes that we have and sort of the passing of generations and everything. Not saying this gets at it exactly, but sort of I actually don't know. Caitlin asked me this yesterday, if this sidewalk stamp or this sidewalk piece still exists, and I'm not sure. We can walk by sometime. I wouldn't think so though. Yeah. Thank you so much. That was interesting, at least.
So are you living in Memphis now?
I am. Yeah, I am living here. I stopped working at the newspaper in 2019 and started freelancing about a year and a half ago. So I am sort of figuring that out as I go, as far as freelancing for different clients and that kind of stuff. I'm still a photographer in Memphis, and still trying to photograph and kind of follow different stories in the city.
These are wonderful.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Yeah, I was really fortunate to be able to meet so many nice people that, you know, share time with me and share their lives with me. I think, yeah, I really appreciate it.
I think WKNO should have a short movie, you know, half-hour program on this, the foothold.
Yeah, I don't know. I would have to get some more images together. Like I said, it's weird when you work on something for so long, kind of, and it's been gone for a while now. But yeah, I mean, ideally, like I'd like to put together some final piece of maybe a book or something like that, as far as kind of seeing what it was and kind of what it turns into, sort of how the area will change with South City as far as like a redevelopment, and a lot of the stores that I photographed are closed now, you know, and there's a lot of things that are for sale around there. Kind of see how it looks a decade from now. I think it'd be interesting.
Britt, I've had a question.
Oh, sure.
Two questions.
Yep.
As a photojournalist, you approach a scene to take a photo. What goes through your mind as a photographer? Is it just spur of the moment? Are you looking for composition? Are there things that you are sensitive to before you take that particular picture?
Sure.
For example. And then I have a follow-up question.
Okay. Can I answer that one first? And then I'll get your follow-up. So I think different circumstances have different things. You know, photojournalists for paper, you photograph everything. Sometimes I'm just looking for something that kind of looks nice from like a baseball game or something a little less heavy. But for stories that I work on like this, the thing that kind of drives me when I'm photographing is kind of feelings, as far as being less worried about the composition or composure. And obviously that's all in there. You know, I've been trained and studied and photographed in many different ways. But at the end of the day, I don't think like a photo is successful unless it makes me feel something, and unless I think it can make y'all feel something when you're looking at them. And that's either a feeling of connection with the people that you're seeing, and sort of a little more understanding than maybe you had before you saw pictures from wherever I'm photographing. And obviously, like, you worry about light and stuff like that, but the world's like, I don't know, I had a buddy say this to me when we were photographing about like light poles and stuff like that. It's like the world's a dirty place, you know, like there's things all over the place that can't make perfect pictures. So at the end of the day, it's like, it's still a wonderful picture if it's not necessarily composed exactly the right way or neat and clean or anything like that. But like I said, I just kind of focus on how it feels to be in that room at that time and portraying that feeling to other people when they see the picture.
My follow-up question is, when you set aside your photojournalist identity and you take photographs,
Yeah.
What do you take photographs of?
Everything. Everything. Yeah. I love taking pictures of nature stuff. I do a lot of hiking and kayaking and stuff like that. And that's when it's like similar things, like something that's really pretty or something that like makes me feel, or something that like just stop and pause. I'll take a picture of it. You know, they could be anything. Like I said, I did do a lot of nature, and I still do, especially during the pandemic, at the front end of it. So I made like a little zine of kind of all these walks that I took and hikes and stuff like that. And I photographed like friends and family, and kind of anything that comes up along the way that sort of sparks interest or seems unique, I'd say. But in my free time, I do, when I'm photographing like that, like if, you know, friends and family that see me as a photographer, like they'll, you know, when we go out to like events that are like pretty photogenic, you know, like if you're going to like a fair or a show or a concert, like I don't necessarily photograph those in ways that I would if I was working, you know. It's like a different feeling for that.
I have a question. Have you ever photographed an area along Walnut Road close to homes which to me is a really interesting area because it's very close to some very affluent homes, and the area is undergoing gentrification right now.
Yeah.
I'm sure the people who live close to that are real happy to see it, but I keep wondering what's happening to these people who lived in those homes. They look so horrible, now they look so nice. Now those people can't afford to live there anymore, so I'm curious to know what's happening.
Just right there, just high school.
Yeah. Right
Yeah,
across
over by the
from East High
library.
School.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I've driven by that place before too. And I wondered what was up. Like if someone or some company bought all those homes at the same time. Or what happened. You know, I thought about that. Like there's been plenty of things that I haven't photographed in Memphis that I think really deserve time and attention.
I just think there's
there was
a
the
story
big
there.
apartment. Yeah, no, I think so too. I haven't photographed there before. There's other places that I've had a very similar feeling.
Well, you see it all around the United States, actually.
Yeah.
Gentrification.
I mean, frankly, like
It's
Memphis is
massive.
a
People
little
live here.
behind on
Right.
development in the city, and it's kind of all catching up right now as far as the amount of money and development happening in the city. So, yeah, in an ideal world, you'd have many more journalists and photographers in a city this size to kind of pursue many different stories. And there's quite a few in the city still. They're kind of split out across different publications now. But yeah, I think more the better as far as photographing things like that.
Do you spend much time with digitally editing the pictures that you take?
Oh gosh, as little time as I can. I really dislike my computer. It is a pain, but I do. I mean, like, I was complaining to Caitlin about this the other day, because like I've gone through and photographed and re-edited. You know, like this is a talk. I used to give quite a few talks back in the day. It's been a little, like this is the first one in a long time, but so I'll re-edit, because as you get older and more experienced and like the technology gets better, it's like you can re-edit in a way that makes it look more natural. I don't edit too much. As a journalist, it's really trying to photograph in a way that when it comes to like the Photoshop stuff, it's basically just making it try to look as close to as what it looked like for you while you were photographing. So it's just like a little bit of color adjustment, a little bit of contrast, and then that's about it. I really try, especially when we're working on longer things, where I have the time to kind of sit around and make pictures the way that I want to make them. Like I don't crop pictures, like however I take a picture in the camera is exactly what I'm trying to get in the camera usually. Not like a super hard and fast rule all the time as far as like freelancing goes, because like you're only there for 10 minutes to an hour, and you just have to get it. But it is tough, like the whole back end of it. Digital's like I learned on film, and I'm forever grateful for that. But the amount of time you sit at a computer squinting and going back and forth between glasses is difficult. I made the mistake of getting those blue light glasses that change the tone of everything, so I have to have two different glasses. Yeah. Thank you all so much.
Brad Vest, if you look it up, you can find it. He's got some wonderful pictures on the website from a lot of his photography.
Yeah, and there's more.